Yo, what's going on? It's Johnny King with another episode of the Becoming Kings podcast. And I am here in Colorado with a brother from another mother who just happens to be across town. It's funny that we're meeting virtually, but this is how it is in today's day and age. Jason B. Kendrick, who's already been on the show, but now I get you one-on-one, which is going to be even more fun in many regards, so we can go deeper. But thanks for being on, brother.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much. Once again, thank you for being on our podcast and being on the Mad Men. MadmenRadio.com is growing leaps and bounds, and the Mad Men of Masculinity page on YouTube is getting up there. So, and it's because of great guests like you and great content that we're getting there. So, I
I
truly
think it's
appreciate
huge.
it.
Yeah, you guys are hustling, and I was going to say, just to, toot your horn or let you kind of speak to, your own intro, since I've introed you on a different episode. But if guys are listening to this for the first time, meeting you, you're, a radio podcast personality of, as you mentioned, kind of like a co-host of the Mad Men of Masculinity podcast, which is an awesome show and one that I'm privileged to be on. So thank you, like I said, for doing that. But you're also a coach, right? You're a speaker, you're an author. What
I
else do
play
you
with the
do?
keyboard occasionally. Yeah, put some
See,
words on
yeah,
paper. Things happen.
tickle the ivories. Yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
great. I love it. And it's cool that we're both Colorado dudes at the moment. So, um, tell us a little bit more, though, if you don't mind, just about your journey to where you find yourself today. Like, were you always into personal development? Was there an awakening? Give a little bit more of your background story now that I've got you one-on-one.
Yeah, it's like most people, I had no idea when I was a kid I'd be here. I thought I'd be a pilot or I thought I'd be this or that, and joined the Air Force out of high school, basically just to get out of Alabama. And grew up as an Army brat, so we spent half of my childhood in Germany, the other half in Texas and Georgia, and then ended up in Alabama for the last 2 years of high school. And it's like, all right, Alabama's all right, but let me get out of here. So I
Mm-hmm.
joined the Air Force and ended up right back in Germany. But through that process, when I got out of the Air Force and ended up back in Alabama, it was like, after I think about 3 years, it's like, oh wait, I don't have to stay here. I'm an adult now. I can go places. So I basically packed up and moved to Breckenridge and started teaching snowboarding, living that lifestyle. Did that for 7, 8 years, and it was actually, I think it was 2006. I hadn't seen my mom in several years, and she was coming to Denver for the metaphysical fairs, and just because I hadn't seen her forever, it's like, all right, I'll come down. We're gonna hang out, and it was my first metaphysical fair. And I don't know if you know, but it's been sold to Body Mind Spirit, but the guy who used to run it, Shanti, he had the longest running metaphysical fair. It's like 30 something years long here in Denver. I think it was the longest one nationwide. But anyway, I got there and it was kind of like, who are all these weird people? Why do I feel like I fit in? And then a lot of divine guidance. So standing in line to go see a speaker who ended up becoming one of my mentors for a while. And some guy in front of me was like, "Oh, we're talking about like the word picture thing, It's like, "Oh, maybe you should be, maybe you should write a book." I'm like, "A book? What the? Where did that come from?" But they
Mm-hmm.
planted that seed, and then later on, it just kind of grew. And then one day, I sat down and started writing, and unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, showed that kind of stream of consciousness, vomitous mass of words to my father, who wanted to be a writer as well. He was
Mm-hmm.
had several manuscripts, and he kind of ripped it apart, but gave me some structure. So after that, I was like, all right, I don't want to have that review ever again. So I made sure I put some structure into
Yeah.
the books, and even now, it's like anything else. They become your children, and then I want to go back now and like redo them and relaunch them and things like that. But the two over my shoulder. The blue one is my first one. It's Not Your Life, It's You. A Layman's Guide to the Power Perspective. Long, crazy title. Another reason I want to redo it. And
Mm-hmm.
then the green one's the second one. It's It's Not Your Life, It's You. Book two, A Deeper Journey to Power Perspective, which for me at that time, it was something I needed to learn and digest, was that maybe a higher perspective is the way to kind of get through this life, at least on with a better mindset, because most of us, and I know myself included, kind of grow up in this victim mindset, like, oh, it's my parents' fault, it's society's fault, it's where I grew up, it's this, that, the other thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it just felt like to me, like, well, what if maybe at a higher spiritual level I chose this? Like, what if me and God got together and we're like, hey, what kind of crap can we get into this time? What do you want to learn? What do you want to get into? So here's these parents, here's this background, here's this neighborhood, here's this thing to teach you and to give you the experiences you wanted for this life, to learn the lessons
Mm-hmm.
you want to in this life. So that's basically what I wrote about in those. And then of course there's the other one, the Seven Secrets of Modern Dating, which Kirk and I collaborated with two other people and to talk about all the stuff we've learned the hard way about dating. So I mean, it's been pretty fun, pretty interesting journey. I mean,
Well,
I
that
know
could
I
be
met.
I was gonna say that could be a whole nother podcast just talking about dating or
Oh my God,
relationships.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, we spend probably half our time on the Mad Men podcast talking about dating and relationships. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we got a divorce attorney coming in tomorrow to once again talk about divorce and try
Cool.
to help men level up. So I mean, yeah, it is a big topic.
Yep. To say the least. Well, you dive into the I mean, you're talking about just a higher perspective. What's the difference between a lower and a higher perspective in your mind?
I think it's like anything else when you think about levels. I mean, you can think about grades. If you're trying to teach quantum physics or calculus to a kindergartner, it's not quite going to get there. So it's like knowing kind of where you're at, maybe even looking at a higher level of like, okay, I didn't create myself. So obviously there's a creator. And most likely that divine intelligence and I collaborated on this experience I'm having now.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's hard to, especially when you've had a lot of trauma, you've had a lot of maybe bad experiences, go, I wouldn't have chosen this. But then again, when you're an eternal spiritual being up there with the creator going, let's see what mess I can get into. Let's see, I know that I'm eternal, so I'll take on all of this stuff. I'll go to the densest dimensional level and the level of dichotomy and black and white, and we have this dualistic mindset here of black and white, good and evil, men and women, etc., etc. But the biggest issue is when you're connected to spirit and you're connected to everything, you're like, okay, I know everything, I know I'm connected to everything, so this is be awesome. Let me set up this lifetime to learn these certain lessons. But
Mm-hmm.
then we come down here and completely forget all of that other stuff. And so I think taking a higher perspective and going, well, what if I chose it? I know for me, when I did this and really kind of wrote the books and went through that process, it helped me to take a little power back, because that victim mindset is very insidious. It's like you feel like I didn't choose this, so I have no control over this. So in some ways, I can't change this. Whereas if I go, well, maybe at some level, even if I don't remember, even if I'm not even sure I believe it, I chose to have this experience. I chose these parents and this social economic background in this country to have these things go on. I mean, honestly, those are the things that happen anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Might as well go, well, what did I learn from that? Because those are things that make me who I am.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I take a higher perspective and go, okay, this is what made me who I am. This is what I learned. What can I do with that? How can I take that forward and maybe make it a strength and a skill?
So if I'm hearing you correctly, in this regard, it is kind of the difference between victimhood or victimhood or being a victor to your life, right? Choosing to play above or below the line in some regards. There's multiple levels, of course, but one of the big ones is life happening to you or life happening for you.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's like Albert Einstein said, the biggest decision we can ever make, the biggest question we can ask ourselves is the universe friendly or not? When you're in a victim mindset, it's not. When you're, kind of in that, oh, if it wasn't for bad luck, I'd have no luck at all. Well, that's kind of that victim mindset. You don't feel like you have any control.
Yeah.
But even if it's just a mind game, even if it's just, brainstorming, mental gymnastics, it still has a shift in your perspective when you say, maybe I chose this. And if I did, to what purpose? And it's like one of the things you say a lot from doing Tony Robbins work. You need better questions. The quality of your questions equals the quality of your life. Well, I mean, that's a big question. What if me and God co-collaborated on this life I'm in? And I think sometimes it can actually even ease some of the trauma and the pain when you realize, okay, well, maybe I chose this. Maybe I do have some power. Maybe this was part of the plan all along, even if I didn't remember it or don't know why.
And so why 2 books at this point? Is book 2 just an extension of your own leveling up and you had a new perspective and you wanted to share that?
Yeah, it was kind of another one of those divinely guided things where I got done writing the first one and was going through the process of self-publishing and whatnot. But because during that process, I grew so much, I really wanted to change the whole thing. I wanted to go back and like rip it apart and change the whole thing. And I was telling somebody about that. And like I said, Divine the Guide, he goes, well, wait, you were there when you wrote it. Somebody will be there when they read it. So just write another one.
Yeah.
Oh, well, okay. Well, that, and that fits my personality. So I'm like, I don't want to go back and re-edit this thing and redo it. So let's just do another one.
Yeah. Yeah. What's interesting when you say that, it reminds me of when I was 30 years old and had just started going through the process of a divorce. And my mom had passed away. My dad had come out of the closet. Like, I decided to leave my corporate job. I wasn't working. So I had this idea to start a website, and to give full credit. Actually, Lewis Howes is the one who helped me tell me to do this new website. And so we were having dinner together. And of course, it's so cliche, but we started writing stuff down on a napkin. And that's when it started. It started with a napkin, but then it resulted with me working with a Tony Robbins coach. Every single week, he would be checking in, like, so how's your new website and your workbook for the website going? And I was like, oh man, like, I just finished, but now I feel like the beginning isn't as solid as the end. So I'm going to go back and rewrite it. And to his credit, he was very patient. He said, okay, cool. So the next week, it's like, how is it? Is it done? Well, no, now I rewrote the beginning, but now I feel like it's not in alignment with the end. And he used that opportunity to be like, dude, when is it going to ever be done? And where else do you do this in your life where you're constantly kind of like a perfectionist, but because it's never quote unquote done, you never actually have to take the risk of putting it out there to the world. And he told me that whole standard of perfection is the lowest human, measurement or what's the, what I'm thinking of, the lowest human standard, there you go, that we could have, because perfection isn't really something that is attainable. So we might think of it consciously as like, oh, I'm working towards perfection, practice equals perfect. But in reality, subconsciously, we know it's never attainable. And thus it just never is going to get done. So we don't ever actually put it out there. It's like, dude, at some point you have to realize that good enough and put out to the world is better than perfectly never finished. And so I was like, okay. So I think it's to that point. And I think it's really cool that you said that. It's like, you just let that book one live as it relates to where you were in your time then. And then you wrote book two, which is probably cool for the reader too, to see your own evolution, and then have people grow with you and read, book number two. And I'm sure there's a book number three in you, and maybe book number four. Like, is that part of the process?
Yeah, those are still in manuscript form on the laptop. It's, I keep coming up with ideas. I'm one of those idea people. And so what I really need to do is find me a girl who's very structure oriented.
Yeah.
So she can be like, finish, crack the whip on me. But
yeah.
I have like the Deception of Duality book, which really talk about the, being a whole being and embracing the shadow side, both the shadow and light, to be a whole being. And then the Mr. Nice Guy and Superwoman book, which I've got one manuscript kind of done, and then I had an editor look at it. She's like, "Oh, we should probably do it from this kind of angle," and I'm like, now I gotta rewrite the whole thing. But it's such a growth process, because each time, that's why I even saying, I think we were talking about before we got on air, is like, I kind of want to go back to those two, re-edit them, maybe combine them, retitle it, repackage it, and put it out again, kind of as a new edition. But yeah, that perfectionistic thing, I mean, that's the way I grew up. My father having his experience, not really having a father around, his parenting style was kind of like very critical, very judgmental, and there wasn't a lot of education. It was more of a, why don't you know this? And so in my mind, I generated this mindset of, okay, well, I got like one shot at this, so it's got to be perfect. But then the funny thing about it is, perfect is very much opinion oriented.
Yeah.
So what is perfect? Like, some perfect to me would be completely different to you.
Right.
This is a perfect steak, and you're like, no, that's too well done, or that's not well done enough, or it's too much pepper.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
Perfectionism is such a insidious tool we use to keep ourselves down.
Right. Which is, to your point, a really great one too. Is like, it's so subjective. The perfect, quote unquote, perfect partner is totally different from person to person, right? If you want to,
and day to day.
yeah. Depending on the mood, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. What do you feel like are some of the things that you hope readers take out of your books? Like what are the main concepts or the messages of both books, or both books as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, in each one there was kind of a theme, but really the general theme was, the power perspective, using perspective as a tool to get your power back, to take some
Mm-hmm.
power back, a little shift in your mindset to go, hey, if I was powerful enough to choose this and to create this, then maybe I'm powerful enough to change it. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's just a matter of shifting. Because I mean, when you're in the victim mindset, which many of us are trained into, especially here in the West and in the US, that you just feel powerless.
Yeah.
And you and I both know. I mean, we met doing personal development work, so it's like, it's just that simple shift in mindset, a shift. And so in the books, I wrote them very conversationally. I wanted to feel like we're having a conversation together, which is some people love, some people hate. It just depends on who's reading it. It's kind of that opinion thing again, but I wanted it to be very easy to read, quick to read, and have people go, okay, I can shift this. I can decide to be in power. I can decide that I have the power to do this. And even if I don't believe it, quote unquote, right now, I can at least have this dialogue with myself. Like, what if I did choose this? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
this is my life anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So if I did choose it, then maybe having the power to create this, I have the power to change it.
Yep. 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 That's a great point. And I guess I feel like a bunch of what you were saying earlier, like again, having a father who was, maybe more heavy-handed on criticism, obviously coming from the military. He was in the military, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. Both my
So
parents
much
were.
of that, so much of that is such the masculine, energy of like having something be oriented towards an end result, and being as perfect as you can, because that means your brother or sister in arms life is dependent upon it, trying to avoid as many mistakes as possible. That certainly obviously has a huge impact on a
Right.
child's upbringing, I gotta imagine, right?
Yeah, and the funny thing is, I mean, he did the best he could. His father passed when he was 5 from a drunk driving accident, and so he was
Mm,
basically raised by his single mother and 2 older sisters who were his
mm,
sisters, and they really want to raise him. So he basically, and I think in some ways, of course, this is kind of after the fact. He passed in 2015, so some of this I've had to piece together, but I don't think he necessarily felt like he had the tools to be a father. So he did the best he could, kind of adopting the societal norm of the time of like toughen up, toughen the kids up, make the boy strong, all that stuff, and you know, didn't really teach me much. I think some of that might have been like he didn't feel like that was his responsibility or that he could. So it's just more the critical why aren't you how is this? I just remember learning to kind of walk on eggshells and be like, okay, dad's home, like don't tick dad off, don't be seen too much, or he'll ask me a question that I can't answer. So these are the little things that I think honestly I chose because maybe in a past life or a past incarnation I had all those things. And this time it's
mm-hmm,
like, okay, well I had the crew, I had the family, I had the whole thing, I had the disciples or whatever. Now let's see what I can do without any of that. Just
mm-hmm,
kind of like just here you go. And I think sometimes having a perspective of spirit, like a eternal spiritual perspective of, hey, we're going through each one of these lives for a purpose.
yeah,
So they're not going to be perfect, but they do have a purpose. We're here to experience as much as we can experience at this level.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And it's interesting too to think about perspective as it relates to um, just the stories that we create, right? You literally said like my dad passed in 2015, so I'm kind of piecing these things together, aka you're just kind of creating meaning out of
Mm-hmm.
the breadcrumbs, or the clues that you've had from your experience with him. And again, just interesting to take to my father, who's still alive. My mom passed in 2006. Like the stories I had created as a child, and then to actually have the courage to ask my dad and be like, no, that's not even remotely close to what happened. I'm like, oh, really? Like, fill me in. And what was mom's opinion? And just again, very, very interesting how perspectives can dramatically shift just from one conversation, right?
Yeah, and it's so funny because being their firstborn, the firstborn is usually the kind of test child,
Yeah.
and then he had he was married 2 more times, and each one there was there's my stepsister and then my stepbrother, and and of course he's growing and learning and evolving and becoming he's a better father, better at at what he's doing. And I just remember still being in my kind of like, well, why did I get this? And then look at how much better they got it. And having these kind of ego conversations, and even being like, as father and son, I mean, as people, a lot of times when we're in families, we can get stuck into roles.
Yeah.
And I think he kind of got stuck into his I got to be up here role, and so he had to keep me kind of below. And so, like, even when I was showing him my book after I published it, he couldn't call it a book. He was like, it's a pamphlet, your pamphlet or whatever. I'm like, why do we got to keep these levels? But it's kind of like, as human beings, we can get stuck there. And then looking back, and I think in my piecing together, there's a much more positive spin. Like, I can look back on, even though some of it seems very negative, it's like, well, if I chose that, then he did exactly what I asked him to, maybe on a higher spiritual level. Like, sometimes our greatest enemy, our greatest foe, is our best friend on that other side, because they chose to be that person for us to give us that experience. And it's like, well, I've had that experience. It's made me who I am. What do I do with that? How do I turn it into a skill? Maybe I can take this trauma and this pain and these things to other people and create healing in my life and in their lives as well through sharing my experience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And looking at how it can, like you said, ultimately be a teacher, right? Whether it be relationships or experiences, upraisings. How can we, again, taking it from Tony Robbins, if we're going to blame them for all the bad, we have to also blame them for all the good, right? Which is a complete shift in perspective. And so, yeah, there's a lot of truth to what you're saying. And I think it really is a massive perspective shift that a lot of men need to have in terms of just taking radical ownership of their results, and not to blame or shame themselves, but just be like, all right, well, if I've got the results that I'm currently looking at based off of my past actions, what needs to change in order for me to have different results? And I think that's a very humbling conversation for one to have with someone, or with God, or however you want to look at it. And I certainly
With
feel
yourself,
like I feel like I definitely had that around 30 years old, and I continue to have it on like a very regular basis. I think it's why it's good to take some sort of like life audit of yourself. Where you at? What can you be grateful for? What do you need to do to level up? Right. So
yeah, I think it's a conversation you got to have quite often. I mean, we just did an episode not too long ago on the Mad Men show, the freedom and responsibility. Freedom and responsibility should, are basically on a scale. They go hand in hand, and so many of us, and I mean, just see out in the world, we just have gotten away from the responsibility of our life and our results. We just want kind of everything handed to us in a way. And I mean, I get it. That's kind of how we're here. Take this magic pill. This is what you need right here. It's like we moved away from responsibility, and sometimes our responsibility comes from looking at your life and going, okay, results, often harsh, always fair. What are my results? Do I like these results? If not, like you said, what do I need to do to change them? I had to do that recently. I had to admit to myself, my body's aging. Even though I still feel 18 up here, the rest of me was like, nah, dude, you're getting up there. So I had to just kind of bite the bullet. Like, all right, now I need to look into vitamins and working out and testosterone replacement and these different things that in my mind before I was like, I don't need those things. I'm young forever. And I was like, well, sometimes we need a little help. And that first takes with looking in the mirror and going, hey, what do I need?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What do you feel like kind of bouncing more into the conversation of just actually offering men support and results with your coaching? What do you feel like are some of the things that are unique gifts to you and your style of coaching that helps men shift, if you will? It's a pretty broad question, but you can take that wherever you want to go.
Basically, I what I've learned is I have to share my experience. I have to share the nice guy syndrome, the isolationism. I have to share all these things that I still to this day deal with. And these things that I am aware of and have probably a better handle on, but I'm still dealing with it. We say all the time on the show, we're not perfect. Kirk and I will both be like, yeah, we don't have it all figured out.
Right.
We do the show because we need to hear this all the time. Like, we're doing the show, so we're constantly reminded of it. But first sharing my experience, but then also all of the trainings and all the things I've done, and realizing that's why I think I lean more towards a personal development coaching approach because I mean, when we shift our mindset, when we shift our do a little personal development, it changes. It's a domino effect. It changes everything else. So
Yep.
if we're
Yep.
doing business coaching or financial coaching, I mean, and I do that mainly because in all the thousands and thousands of dollars I spent on coaching and different things, I realize a lot of times if you don't vet or you don't find somebody who coaches in the vein that you need, it doesn't work. I know I had a coach, a business coach, who was really pushing me to do high ticket coaching sales, but it was triggering more of my stuff than it was helping, kind of thing.
Mm.
Like it was really kind of pushing those buttons. So I was more frozen working with her than I had been before because and then, going back and kind of unpacking, I was all right, well, obviously we're not dealing with the issue internally that's keeping me from the success. And that's where I kind of shifted. So I'm taking those experiences, and then there's so much good information out there that you and I both gone through these different things, and then trying to encapsulate that and share it forward, kind of
Yeah.
pay it forward thing to the next guy.
I feel like you bring up something that is real for me too, is like, I feel like I've done that too, where I look at certain people and whom I admire, and they've made massive shifts, like, the trajectory that they went on, and even getting into Tony Robbins for a while. I remember going and seeing him for years. And the question I was asking that I was hoping he'd get to, which was, he talks about how, at the age of 19, I think he was making $1 million. Right. But then for years, he plateaued at $1 million. And it wasn't until ultimately, like, I think the birth of his first son had him go up to $1 million, but then he was sabotaging his own, financial income for years until he was able to make another shift. And I was like, well, what was that other shift? And I think it's one of those things where, you look at someone like that or other people, and I'm like, oh, I want to do that. I want to be on that trajectory.
Okay.
And then when I would step into big responsibilities or having coaches who would really push me, man, I did not step up to the plate. If anything, I shrank down massively, and I couldn't even move. I couldn't even get anything done. And I was just like a hermit. And I realized for some people, they just have the right scenario to make some massive earth-shattering moves in life. And for some of us, and I'm one of them, I feel like sometimes steady is the race. And I just feel like sometimes it's just like, it's the tortoise or the hare. And I think for me, when it comes to health and relationships and business, and I'm almost just better if I just plug along and just continually focus on 1% better each day.
Yep.
as a philosophy, than to try to go from where I'm at to making $1 million tomorrow. It's like, sometimes that's a really big leap, and my brain won't conceptually wrap its head around it. Right. Do you feel like you've had some of that experience too?
Oh yeah, I mean, that's basically in a nutshell what you just said is how I ended up falling on personal development coaching as my niche, because so many of us are marketed into this mindset of bigger is better, more. We all got to be millionaires. We all got to be Tony Robbins. Tony Robbins is a freak of nature. He's always been a freak of nature. Like, not all of us are built that way. So I mean, yes, learn from him, glean as much as you can, but then you have to meld it into your life and your way of being. And so a lot of the coaching I do is really getting into, how did you grow up? Who are you? What do you really want? And then how about we, like you said, find the way that works best for you. Because so many people are just so focused on the money and the success. Well, not everybody's meant to be a millionaire. Not everybody's meant to be a billionaire. Some of us are meant to be fathers and shop owners and truck drivers and papermen, or carpenters. Like, not everybody is meant to be up at that level. And for a lot of people, when they do that, they're miserable.
Yep.
They get up there and they're like, well, okay, I got all this stuff, and now what? I'm still miserable. Well, what is your heart saying? What is your soul saying? What is it that actually will feed you? And for most of us, we never find that because we're too busy chasing something that's, this carrot dangled by, social media and advertising, instead of going, well, maybe I don't need all that. Maybe I want to be the best father. Maybe I want to be the best carpenter. Maybe I want to be the best Pee Wee football coach. I mean, whatever the thing is. I mean, I always laugh. I keep, remember the old movie City Slickers with Jack Palance, like, it's the one thing, find the one thing. I try to help guys find that one thing, and then make a plan to go in that direction.
Mhm.
So often we get so sidetracked by so many other things. I mean, the midlife crisis that used to be huge in the 80s and 90s was because everybody did what they were told to do. Graduate high school, go to college, find the wife, get married, have 2.5 kids, house, white picket fence.
Mhm.
But it wasn't filling their soul, and so then they're like, well, I did everything I was told. Now what? So let me divorce my wife, get a hot young girlfriend and a Corvette.
Mhm.
That's not really doing it, but it's something.
Mhm.
So really digging into who am I, and what is it that I need? What is it that I want? What can I create? And that's
Yeah.
why I focus so much on that power perspective, because I think if we can shift into I chose this, why did I choose this? And if I did choose this, and this is my experience, obviously I did it for a purpose. Maybe that purpose is to share that. Maybe that purpose is to use that for the next generation, for my neighbor, for whatever. But just shifting that perspective to something more positive than I didn't choose to be born, or I didn't choose to have the experience. Well, maybe you didn't, or maybe you did.
Mhm.
What's more effective?
Amen. And I think there's something there that again kind of resonates for me. I'm gonna close these blinds because when we first started recording, the sun was behind clouds and now it's burning my eyes out. But while I'm gonna do that, I want you to answer the question. Like you talk about the power perspective. You also talked about earlier about kind of reclaiming your power. I think for those, just going back to Layman's guide, what does that even mean? Because I think, if people haven't heard that, they're like, what do you mean by reclaiming my power? Like I'm a superhero, or what does that mean? Or what does it even mean to give away one's power? Can you kind of expand on that idea?
Yeah, I mean, the whole idea of power perspective, the layman's guide kind of subtitle was really the idea of if you can't explain something simply, you don't really understand it. So I followed that. Like, well, how simply can I explain this? And honestly, taking your power back is going more internal,
Mm-hmm.
because victimhood is always you're a victim to something external, something outside yourself. So what if we flip the script and go all the way back to what if you chose these parents, this upbringing, these traumas, this experience before you even got here because you wanted to have this experience, you wanted to learn these lessons.
Mm-hmm.
And in that way, just by shifting that mindset from, oh, it happened to me, or maybe I chose this. And if you do that, there is a fundamental shift within you that goes, okay, if I chose this, this is, I mean, and it's funny because so many times people just, they fight for their own limitations. They want to say, I didn't choose this. I wouldn't have done this. Like, well, but this is your life. This is where you are now. These are the experiences you had. So why not just shift your opinion, your perspective, and go, hey, maybe I did choose this, and now I can do something with it. Versus, oh, this is just a weight on my shoulders that I have to carry around. Everything is a gift and a curse, but usually that shift between gift and curse depends on our perspective on it. Like you were saying,
Mm-hmm.
you gotta thank your parents for the good things as well. You gotta thank God for the good things as well. You gotta think of experiences, because everything is, it is perspective. Everything can be good or bad. I mean, that's why you go to a crime scene, you go to a car accident, and you ask 10 people, you can get 10, probably 12 different stories.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody sees things differently. So how can we use that in a beneficial way so we have better results? If nothing else, at least feel a little better about yourself.
Mm-hmm. Which I think again speaks to that whole premise of turning one's mess into their message. I think we've talked about that before. But it really is like flipping the script on like pretty much everyone that has had a positive impact in life on others oftentimes takes some sort of previous experience and turns it into fuel, right?
Yeah.
Turns it into power, personal power to take action to make things better, either to become a better father, husband, businessman, athlete, musician, whatever the case might be. They're driven towards, some type of purpose that's the direct result of the mess they've gone through. Some people are definitely driven by pain and by a chip on their shoulder, and I think other people are really driven by love, and I think you can still have a powerful impact coming from either place. But I do feel like sometimes if one's purpose, let's say, to prove to dad that I am worth something, you know, and he beat me when I was younger. And now my mess of my childhood has become my message. Oftentimes I have found that even once arriving, you know, at some level of quote unquote success, that there's still a huge void that needs to be filled. So I do feel like, in going back to you and your books and the message that you're talking about, like there still has to be some sort of perspective shift from, like, what am I proving? What can I get, you know, to what can I truly give, right? What can I actually impart on others in a positive way? And do you feel like that's a big part of your own journey, or the things that you work on with other men, the concepts in your book?
Yeah, in my whole journey has really been a journey of self-love and self-acceptance.
Mm.
And coming from the way I grew up, taking a perspective of maybe I chose this. And in a lot of ways, that was something I just either intuited or it just was given to me. It just kind of came to me like, well, you chose this, so what are you going to do with it?
Mm-hmm.
And it helps me to come to terms with who I am, what I went through, what my mindset is, and in some ways appreciate and love myself even more. And for
Mm-hmm.
most men nowadays, that is a very, very big bridge to cross because of just society and just the messaging out there about, you know, men are bad, men are trash, you know, masculinity is toxic, et cetera, et cetera. But is it really? And it starts in the mirror and starts with us looking at ourselves and going, okay, if I have this divine creator who is perfect or as close to perfect as we can get that created me, and I had some part to play in that, then who am I to say that I'm less than or I'm worthless? Maybe I'm just using the wrong filter. Maybe I'm using the wrong perspective. And to use that power perspective and shift it into number one, a point of choice, which takes your power back, and then starts giving you at least a beginning to appreciate who you are, your past, what you've been through, and then maybe those gifts that you don't even know you have that you can give to the world. Because every man needs his purpose, but if we're stuck in this self-loathing and we're not looking at ourselves like valuable enough to give, and that's something I personally still deal with. Like, you know, talking about the perfectionistic thing, I should have had those other books done a while ago, but I'm like, oh, they're not good enough yet, or they're not done, or I need somebody else's permission. And that's kind of how I spent most of my life, like waiting for somebody to say, okay, tag, you're it. It's your turn.
Mm-hmm.
And then I finally realized, wait, I have to tag myself in. Like this, I have to choose myself. But it's hard when you're constantly judging yourself and not loving yourself. Having a shift of perspective, like, hey, maybe I chose this. Maybe I do have that power. Maybe I chose it for a reason. Let me look at my life, look at my strengths and weaknesses, and look at all the things that make up me, and how can I share that? I mean, if nothing else, just sharing that and not feeling so isolated and alone for most men is a huge gift.
Yeah, a huge gift, a huge perspective shift, 100%. Yeah, I think that's really, really powerful. I appreciate you kind of leaning into that. You know, more talking about, again, just working with particular, I mean, do you focus primarily on working with men? Is it anyone? Is it men and women? What does your
It's
coaching look
both.
like?
I work with whoever is ready to actually look at themselves, which sometimes
Mm-hmm.
is hard to find. But that's basically it. Like I had somebody reach out to me and ask me about my coaching, and I could tell as soon as I said I do personal development coaching catered to the client, and I heard nothing back. It's like, oh, they're looking for a business coach or something,
Mm-hmm.
which we cover those things when I work with people, but it's at a different level. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I know a lot of folks are not quite at that space to go, oh, let's shine a light on me. Let's talk about me. So yeah, it can be very in-depth coaching, but the results I think are very impactful in all areas because you are the creator of your reality. You are the one creating everything. And sometimes when we do self-sabotage, when we aren't having the success we want, and we're trying to do it in these outer ways, we're missing the point. You got to get inside and go, well, why am I protecting myself? What's the little boy inside of me thinking that I need to protect by not getting out there? I know for me, it's still something that right before I get on stage or do anything public, it's like, oh, because that little voice in my head goes, don't get too big. Because, you know, a pedestal makes for a great target. So make sure you don't get too big, don't get too out there. But then it's like, I have to go, well, who says? Like, you know, I get it. I understand that's a fearful thing, and yeah, it's easy to be taking pot shots at, but this is worth it. So let's move forward. And the funny thing is, every time, whatever that fear is, whatever that story is, you realize it's not true. It's just a story you're telling yourself.
Mhm.
And then when you take that action, you take that step, it's like, oh, I actually really enjoyed that. Let's do more of that. But the funny thing is, every time right before, same story comes up, but now you have this experience of getting past that. So if I got past that, what else can I get past? But
Mhm.
it starts with that internal vision, looking inside, talking to that little boy and going, what are you protecting?
Mm.
Because it's usually most of our self-sabotage or behaviors that keep us down is a self-protection mechanism from childhood, from usually really young.
Mhm.
Dad yelled at us when we were small and made us feel afraid and vulnerable. So now we want to be quiet and not seen, or whatever the story is. So
Right.
that's why I like, why focus on the external stuff? Let's go to the important stuff. Let's focus on the heart and the internal, and let the rest of it kind of take care of itself. I mean,
Mhm.
I can show you a million business books, but like you said, if you don't have the internal compass and the internal wiring to do that, then it's not going to work anyway.
Yeah, I just feel like there's just certain people that are wired towards personal growth.
Yeah.
Um, Sometimes they're wired that way because they feel like they're not enough and they've got to become better. I definitely know that well, no, I feel like I've always been wired towards personal development because I was fascinated by it even when I was little. And yet there's definitely been motivations in the past for sure, in my desire to fix myself or to become somebody. And the more that I've gotten into my own developmental journey and healed some of those things, the more it becomes less about my ego and more about it's just like for me, happiness is the result of just making progress. If I feel like I'm not making progress, I really, really struggle. And so I think I liken it to someone who's just struggling with their health. They're overweight, they're not like, and they're like, I don't understand. Why am I not like, I don't know what to do. And yet, if they were to come to me and be like, well, do you have a nutritional coach, a personal trainer? Like, oh yeah, I haven't really thought about that. The interesting thing is that there's people like you who are there to support, to coach, to guide. And yet most people don't realize that there's someone out there like you who could help them along the way of creating greater efficiencies, changing perspectives, changing their lives immensely in just a handful of calls. And yet they kind of do place or stay in that place of victimhood and just kind of talk about oh, I should have done this and I should have done that. And they're just stuck in their story. Right.
Yeah, well,
So,
like that story of the rose-colored glasses. You got the
yeah.
green-colored glasses or the black-colored glasses. Like when you're stuck in that mindset, you only see a very narrow window of things, so you don't realize there's a whole world. There's a whole new world out
Yeah.
there that you can see, but until you open the door or whatnot. So yeah, that's why people like you or me are out here. We're here to help people open new doors and go, hey, there's more out here.
Yeah. Well, what do you feel like, what do you feel like, again, your purpose, your offering, the people that you enjoy working with, men or women, if there's someone who's listening to this and it's kind of like, this is resonating for me. I'm liking Jason and what he's got going on, but I'm a little bit on the fence. I don't know. Maybe they've worked with a coach, and maybe they haven't, right? But they're interested. This is intriguing, but can also be overwhelming. I'm speaking from my own experience before I started really getting into having a coach myself, and now being able to speak from experience from how much my life has changed because of coaching. Um, what would you suggest someone do in terms of how can they get in touch with you? What would that look like with just getting their questions answered? Like, what would be next steps from just listening to this to actually moving the ball like down the field?
I'm pretty easy to get a hold of. I mean, jasonbkendrick.com. I mean, I just use my name for my website to make it easy. You can get me there, Jason at jasonbkendrick.com. Check out our, madmenradio.com. Check out the podcast. I mean, Kirk and I both do coaching. Mine's really on power perspective, really on, personal development, getting into the heart of who you are And so the only thing I ask is that make sure you're ready to look at yourself before you call, because a lot of times it's uncomfortable. But like most things, I kind of use the hot tub analogy. It's very intense at first, but then after you give it a moment, you get into it, then you really relax, and really start to enjoy it, and you get to know who you are even more. You get to find out who is this person I see in the mirror, and what's great about them, instead of, oh, look at these wrinkles, oh, look at this pocketbook. No, let's focus on what's good about you and why you chose to be here and what you're here to do.
Beautiful. So jasonbkendrick.com. You're on socials as well.
All over Instagram, Facebook. I need to get on what is it, TikTok, but I'm still on the fence. 47 this year, be 48 soon. So it's like new technologies. I don't want to put that out there though. I'm not that old.
Yeah, right. I've sometimes I worry about getting on TikTok because I was on it during COVID, and man, it's addictive. Even I've gotten to a good place this year with Instagram and not going down too many real rabbit holes, but it's very possible to lose a lot of your life. Yeah. So,
well, I just think about it even from a business standpoint. It's like, I should probably get on TikTok to get to the younger kids and it's the shorter attention spans and everything else. But there's just that part of me where I'm like, oh, I have to give them access to all my stuff on my phone. No. But I just need to realize they already have access. So just
they're listening and watching 24/7, right? Yeah, it's kind of scary. Yeah, unfortunately. And how is that potentially keeping you from moving things forward? Yeah, I think about the same things as well. So awesome, dude. Well, thank you for being on. I know we could keep talking.
Thank you so much.
As we often do, but I'll have you on, of course, in the future. But I would really recommend those that are listening, men and women, just hit Jason up and just get into a conversation. I think, Jason, you're one of those guys that I know it just kind of shows up real, and you're not going to do a hard sales process. You just really want to connect and see if it's a good fit on both sides, if they really could use your support, and to find out how you can to help them. Right. So just to reach out to you on socials or on your website, as well as your books are on Amazon, correct?
Yeah. Amazon, there are ebooks, paperbacks, and then hopefully there'll be a couple more here soon. But keep me honest and keep posted. We'll be putting some more stuff out there soon.
Well, when you get your next book, you'll need to come promote it on the podcast here. So there you go.
Don't threaten me with a good time. I'm right there with you.
Hey, dude. Well, thank you for being on. Good to see you as always. Looking forward to catching up on the next episode that we are on, whether it be on this one or on yours. Just keep doing what you're doing, and I'm just grateful that again, particularly today, that our paths have crossed. So appreciate you, man.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you. And yeah, we're definitely, next time you're back in Mile High City, we're gonna have you back on the show because we have more to talk about.
There you go. I'm looking forward to it.
For all you guys have been watching Johnny's show, go check out his episode on the Mad Men of Masculinity. YouTube, Spotify, we're out there everywhere.
Mad Men of Masculinity, right? YouTube, everything else, the podcast. Check out Jason's books. Go give him a follow on the socials. Just go to Jason B. Kendrick. You'll find all the good stuff. Just jasonbkendrick.com to be exact. I'll put it in the show notes as well. So thanks, bro. We'll catch up with you soon, man. Thank you for being on.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
See you guys. Thanks for listening. Talk soon. Cheers.